Hello, my favorite English language learners. It is your favorite English teacher here, Amy Joy. And in today's video, we are going to continue our series about social issues in the United States. And lately, whenever I watch the news or listen to the radio, I hear the phrases, "in the era of Me Too," or "in the Me Too era." And even though this might be a controversial subject to discuss, I think it is really important that you know the history of this movement, its impact on American society, and some of the important vocabulary so that you can at least understand when you are hearing the news or the TV talk about this movement. So in this video, I am going to give you 15 vocabulary words and collocations related to the Me Too movement. I will also discuss the history of this movement, along with some important people that you need to know so that you can engage in conversations about this issue a little bit more easily. And before we move on, I would just like to remind you, I do post videos weekly, so if you want to know when I post a new video, make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thanks. Now, before we get into the vocab, I would like to let you know that this video will discuss issues of sexual harassment and sexual assault. So if that makes you uncomfortable, then feel free to click the link above and watch some of my other videos about other social issues in the United States. But if you can, stick with me and let's get started. So like I said, whenever I watch the news or listen to the radio, I hear the phrases, "in the era of Me Too," or "in the Me Too era." And that is our first vocabulary word, the Me Too era. What does this mean? Well, era means time. So it basically just means that we are in the time of Me Too. And what is Me Too? Well, the Me Too movement is a social movement focused on raising awareness of the prevalence of sexual assault, sexual harassment, and sexual misconduct. And this one sentence alone has so much good vocabulary that we are going to stop and break this down. So our second word is to raise awareness of something. This is a great collocation that means to increase visibility or increase social knowledge of a problem. It is not specific to Me Too. It can be used for a lot of other social issues. For example, to raise awareness of climate change, or to raise awareness of deforestation, or to raise awareness of homelessness. But the Me Too movement is focused on raising awareness of the prevalence of sexual harassment and sexual assault, which leads us to word number 3, prevalence of. Prevalence of is the noun form of the adjective prevalent, which means that something is widespread, to happen a lot, to occur often, or to be very common. And again, this word is not only used for the Me Too movement, it can be used in many other contexts, like the prevalence of immigrants in the United States, or the prevalence of English as a second language. This means that immigrants and English as a second language are very common or very widespread. And in the context of Me Too, we can say the prevalence of sexual misconduct. And that means that sexual misconduct happens often, which leads us to number 4. We have sexual misconduct. Sexual misconduct is a noun, and it is an umbrella term or like a category to mean any bad or negative sexual behavior. And it includes both sexual harassment and sexual assault. So what's the difference between sexual harassment and sexual assault? Well, number 5, sexual harassment, is a little less serious. It's still bad, but it is not as violent or aggressive. Some examples of sexual harassment include small physical touches that are not aggressive but still unwelcome or unwanted, maybe making inappropriate or sexual jokes at work, or making any unwanted sexual advances. And this is actually word number 6. Now, making unwanted sexual advances is a very high-level collocation, but very useful in the context of Me Too. And it can include, small physical touches, flirting with a coworker who doesn't want to, and this type of behavior. So sexual harassment and making unwanted sexual advances are not as serious as sexual assault, but still very inappropriate and not tolerated in the Me Too era. So let's move on to number 7, sexual assault. Sexual assault is more violent, more physical, and more aggressive. And sexual assault also can include number 8, which is rape. As you might know, rape is having sex with someone without their consent or willingness. And this actually leads to my next word, which is number 9, consent. And this word means to voluntarily or willingly participate in an activity. So in the context of Me Too, you can understand why consent is very important. Now, as a noun form, we can say to give consent and to ask for consent. And as a verb, we say to consent to something. However, it is not only used to discuss the topic of sex. For example, you always have to consent to the terms and conditions when you download a new app for your phone, or you have to consent to the rules and regulations when joining a new gym. So the word consent is a very flexible word and can be used in many situations, but it is particularly important in the topic of Me Too. So again, the Me Too movement is a social movement focused on raising awareness of the prevalence of sexual assault, sexual harassment, and sexual misconduct. This movement was actually started in 2006 by a woman named Tarana Burke, but it did not gain popularity in the United States until actress Alyssa Milano posted a tweet saying this: "If all the women who had been sexually harassed or assaulted wrote Me Too as a status, we might give people a sense of the magnitude of the problem." When she posted this, thousands of women retweeted this and posted Me Too as their status, and this tweet went completely viral, showing the magnitude of the problem of sexual assault and harassment. And this leads me to vocabulary word number 10, magnitude of. This is another great collocation to mean the extent, the degree, the severity, like how severe or how big this issue is. So the collocation is the magnitude of. In the past, and even still today, survivors of sexual assault and harassment have been too scared to come forward about their experiences. So society never realized the magnitude of the problem. But this leads me to word number 11, to come forward. To come forward in this context means to claim a crime has been committed. And coming forward can also mean that you are naming the perpetrator. And perpetrator is vocabulary word number 12. A perpetrator is someone who commits a harmful act or a crime. And it collocates with the word of. The perpetrator of the crime, a perpetrator of sexual harassment, a perpetrator of kidnapping. So now in the era or the time of Me Too, where everyone knows this is a huge problem, survivors are more willing to come forward, speak against perpetrators of sexual misconduct, and hold them accountable. And to hold someone accountable is vocabulary word number 13, and it means to consider someone responsible or to blame someone. The collocation to hold someone accountable is really important in this topic because in the past, there has been a lot of victim blaming or victim shaming, and this is our word number 14. Victim blaming means that survivors or victims of sexual misconduct are often blamed for the experiences that happened to them. For example, some common accusations or some common phrases that survivors might hear are, "Well, what was she wearing? If she was dressing like that, she was asking for it." Or, "Well, how much did you drink? You need to know your limits." Or, "Well, why would she walk home at nighttime?" All of these phrases and responses really put the blame on the victim or the survivor and do not hold the perpetrators accountable for their actions. But now in the era of Me Too, perpetrators are starting to be held accountable for their actions because more women feel brave enough to come forward. And throughout my explanation, you might have noticed that I often use the word survivors of sexual assault instead of victims of sexual assault. While both words can be used, the word survivor has recently become more popular to talk about people who have endured sexual misconduct. This is because the word survivor emphasizes the person's strength and resilience, whereas the word victim continually defines the person by the trauma that they have experienced. So this is a small language point, but you might hear the word survivor more often than the word victim when hearing conversations about metoo. So all of the vocabulary words that I have covered are extremely important to participate in conversations about the Me Too movement. But when talking about this issue, you also need to understand the cultural situation and the key people who play a part in it. For example, you might hear something like this. After Weinstein, Nassar, and Cosby, men need to learn to respect women. When you hear this, you might think, well, I understand that men need to respect women, but what are those names? Who are those people? What significance do they have to the meaning of this sentence? So let me help you out. These three men are three of the most infamous perpetrators of sexual misconduct in the era of Me Too. And infamous means to be famous for doing something very bad. So I will give you a little bit of information on each one. So if you hear their names in this big cultural dialogue, then you will have a better understanding of why they are being referenced. So number one is Harvey Weinstein. Harvey Weinstein was one of Hollywood's biggest movie producers, and he used his powerful position to sexually assault and sexually harass many, many women. According to Wikipedia, he sexually harassed 107 women, some of whom are really famous and include Salma Hayek, Lupita Nyong'o, Madonna, and Angelina Jolie. And not only did he sexually harass 107 women, he is also accused of raping 20 others. So when Me Too went viral, these women came forward and accused him of this sexual misconduct, and so far he has been convicted of several of these crimes and has been put in jail. Now, moving on to number two, Larry Nassar. Larry Nassar was the team doctor for the United States women's national gymnastics team. According to the New York Times, he sexually abused hundreds of female athletes, and some of the most famous ones include Simone Biles, Michaela Maroney, and Ali Raisman. And over the last few years, these women have come forward and testified about their abuse, and since then, he has also been convicted and put in jail. And our last infamous face of the Me Too movement is Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby was a famous actor and comedian all the way from the 1960s until the 2000s. He was super famous. I actually grew up watching him, but in the era of Me Too, 60 women have come forward and accused him of sexual assault and harassment. He was convicted of 1 count of sexual assault and put in jail. However, due to a technicality or some kind of rule in our legal system, he has actually been released and is currently free right now. So if you ever hear the names Weinstein, Nassar, or Cosby, you have a better understanding of who these men are and why their names are being mentioned. And I also think that mentioning these 3 men highlights the significance and the importance that the Me Too movement has had on society in the United States. This movement has raised the awareness of the prevalence of sexual misconduct and has empowered women and other survivors to come forward and accuse the perpetrators of sexual misconduct to hold them accountable. So now when you hear that we are in the era of Me Too, this is a new chapter in American history that does not tolerate sexual misconduct of any kind. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you learned something new. And if you did, make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel so that you never miss out when I post a new video. All right, I will see you next time. Bye.